Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the second parallel session on investing for change through the World Water Quality Alliance. We're delighted to see you all today, and I'm very excited to bring our panel and our speakers to you today. So this session is an output from the World Water Quality Alliance, and specifically it's hosted by the Ecosystems workstream, and we'll have an introduction to that workstream in just a second. But really it's designed to try and bring together expertise and practitioners, policymakers, education across a whole range of sectors who are focused on delivering effective restoration. And here we're challenged with delivering lake restoration through water quality improvement. So my name is Brian Spears. I'm a freshwater ecologist from the United Kingdom Centre for Ecology and Hydrology, and I'm going to be chairing this session today. So if we just have a quick run through the agenda so that you can see what's going to be coming up today. You're currently having your welcome from the chair. We're then going to pass on to Nina from UNET, who will introduce the World Water Quality Alliance and the Ecosystems workstream. We'll then have a round of speed dating presentations where we will get a chance to meet our restoration superheroes from various parts of the world. And we had 3 other ones earlier in the week. This week we'll be visiting, today we'll be visiting Lake Villarica, Lake Erie, and Lake Victoria. And I should say that for Lake Erie, Ken Irvin, who will have the final word today, is standing in on behalf of Tim Davis, who's had an emergency and can't make it today. We'll then have some feedback from the audience chat with Mike Lurling. So Mike, if you're there, you'll be having lots of fun in the chat. Everybody, we want to hear from you. We need to hear about your experiences. It's very important to us to learn from you. So please engage with Mike. It's really informal. Ask any questions, post any comments that you have, and we'll collect those together. Sandra from JRC will give us an introduction to a new global survey on real-world challenges in water quality management in lakes, and give you a sneak peek at some of the fast developing results that are coming through that survey. And then we'll move on to the panel discussion, which will be chaired by my colleague Lawrence Carvalho. And if you need to see any of the biographies of any of our contributors, please go on the Pathable site and have a look. And then, as I said, Ken will have the final word. So I think that's all from me for now. Please engage with the chat. We want to hear back from you through Mike at halftime. And I'll pass now to Nina. Nina, I'm sharing your slides for you. So the floor is over to you.
Thank you very much, Brian, and welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today. So my name is Nina Rasaka. I'm the coordinator of the World Water Quality Alliance based with the UN Environment Programme headquarters in Nairobi. It's my pleasure here to very quickly introduce the World Water Quality Alliance and also the Ecosystems workstream, which is convening this session. So next slide, please. The Alliance is a voluntary and flexible global multi-stakeholders network that advocates the role of freshwater quality in achieving prosperity and sustainability in the context of the Agenda 2030. The Alliance was set up in 2019 as a response to the UN Environment Assembly Resolution 3/10, which is entitled Addressing Water Pollution to Protect and Restore Water-Related Ecosystems, adopted in 2017 at the 3rd session of the Environment Assembly. So this resolution highlights the need for action to preserve water quality around the world. And as you can see from its title, it recognizes that water is essential for ecosystem functioning and ecosystem services. And again, the main point to take away really is that this resolution requests UNEP to develop a world water quality assessment in cooperation with several other organizations. And so the Alliance was set up and convened by UNEP, recognizing that substantial cooperation and partnership in an area as complex as water quality was needed to deliver such an assessment and to make it a good product. And again, the Alliance is currently receiving generous support from the Swiss Agency for Development and also the Swiss Confederation as a whole. So we're very grateful to that to help deliver the kind of the 3 overarching deliverables of the Alliance, which are on the next slide, please. So these are a global assessment of freshwater quality, drawing on science, technology, and innovation, and specifically a kind of data fusion approach combining in situ monitoring, modeling, and remote sensing. And again, a first global display of water quality baseline was developed earlier this year. It's available, and the final version is expected in early 2023 of the assessment. Again, a second overarching pillar is horizon scanning or agenda setting and investigating selected priority topics so that we can flag issues of emerging concern to water quality. And for instance, one of these is plastics and microplastics and how to monitor these in freshwater bodies. Again, and thirdly, following a bottom-up approach, we have embarked on a series of use cases that aim to co-design and operationalize water quality related services and products based on moderated in-country assessment process. So again, UNEP convenes the Alliance platform and hosts the coordination team, but as mentioned, it's a voluntary open platform that brings together over 50 expert institutions through over 10 different work streams, some of which are receiving seed funding. And these range from modeling, scenario building, to piloting citizen science, to social engagement and youth involvement, and of course to ecosystems, which is this one we're in. Next one, please. So again, just to focus very briefly on the ecosystems work stream, this will set up an ecosystem membership consisting of a network of practitioners responsible for improving water quality in the world's lakes. You'll hear from them today. These draw on experiences, including biotic control, catchment management, and nature-based solutions for water quality management in lakes. And again, there will be a global survey on factors important for lake restoration that we'll get into. And again, finally, this overall work will contribute to an overview of common challenges affecting freshwater lake restoration and successes in addressing them, which will allow the ecosystems work stream to develop a strategy to mobilize cross-sector support and identify solutions for the protection and restoration of lake ecosystems. And again, this will take advantage also of the recently launched UN Decade for Ecosystem Restoration, which is a key vehicle through which we'll be communicating these activities. So again, just finally, we invite you to join the Alliance, also the Ecosystems Workstream. Please don't hesitate to get in touch with us with further questions, and we look forward to the session today and to working with you all. Thank you very much. Brian, over to you.
Thank you, Nina. Thank you. So yeah, just a reminder there, there's a survey to be done, and you can find the link for the survey in the chat on Pathable. So please do go on there and share with us your experiences through that survey. That will inform the white paper that Nina was introducing, and Ken will discuss at the end also. So we move on now to our case studies, and I'd like to introduce now Amerindia Jaramillo from Chile. Amerindia, over to you.
Thanks, Brian. I'm sharing my screen. That's right. Yes. Hi, everyone. I'm Amerindia Jaramillo. I'm the head of the Department of Aquatic Ecosystems at the Chilean Ministry of the Environment. And I'm going to talk about the phosphorus control and management plan for Villarrica Lake Basin, and that we hope it will deliver multiple benefits and social benefits also to local people. And the plan is still under development by our ministry. In this slide, you can see different photos of Villarrica Lake Basin. The lake is located in southern Chile, in South America, and it's one of the main tourist attractions of our country because of the beauty of its natural landscapes and formerly because of its water clarity. First of all, it is important to mention that Lake Villarrica is one of the 23 lakes that are part of the Chilean North Patagonian Lakes District. And also in relation to administrative boundaries, the basin is shared by 4 municipalities, and around 83,000 people live there, population that triples during summer vacations. In addition, the social context of this basin is relevant too, where around 30% of the population belongs to the Mapuche people, one of the first nations of the country and the largest indigenous group in Chile. Moreover, this region also is relevant for its biodiversity. It is the habitat of endangered aquatic species, and given its ecological relevance, 38% of the basin is protected by protected areas. And also more than 65% of the area is covered by native forest and other kind of land natural uses. The main economic activities that take place in the basin are tourism and the salmon production industry. There are multiple sources of phosphorus emissions to surface water in Lake Villarrica, and briefly I can mention diffuse phosphorus export from natural land uses like native forests, and also from human land uses such as urban areas, agricultural crops, and aquacultural livestock landscapes. And finally, there are also some point sources of phosphorus emissions from land-based fish farms and also from wastewater treatment plants. The high levels of nutrients, especially the phosphorus load in the lake and a combination of other environmental factors, have fueled the growth of algal blooms, especially in the last 10 years. This is not only in summer, but also in other times of the year. And the situation has become more and more frequent, 2 or 3 times per year. For this reason, in November 2018, the preparation of the Villarrica Basin decontamination plan began, and the plan's underlying principle is the reduction of the phosphorus load entering Lake Villarrica, and its ultimate goal is the long-term ecological recovery of the lake through different sustainable management of the basin's resources. The plan will be implemented through measures that allow existing and emerging phosphorus reduction, and it has been estimated that the cost of the plan is around $104 million in its 15 years of implementation. Then how do we achieve these goals? The following phosphorus control measures have been proposed in the draft plan to achieve the aim of reducing phosphorus emissions from different kinds of sources. And the main measures are stricter emission standards for effluents from land-based fishing farms and from existing wastewater treatment plants, more robust water quality and point sources discharge monitoring, and to develop an edge of field water quality monitoring program, to promote household connections to the existing sewage systems, and also to restore natural wetlands and riparian buffers to filter nutrients while benefiting aquatic communities. And finally, environmental education strategies will be implemented to involve citizens and raise awareness of the phosphorus issue in Villarrica Lake. And then, despite the progress in the lake decontamination plan, we still have multiple challenges to face. First, we have to adjust the measures of the plan in its final version based on the public consultation on the draft, which took place the first semester of this year. And also a science advisory working group was created, which is supporting the design of the plan measures, and that should accompany the plan implementation process over time. Secondly, it's necessary to create robust public-private partnerships to achieve phosphorus load reduction targets. And in addition, an important part of the local actors living in the basin are Mapuche communities. Therefore, the measures of the plan and the way in which they will be implemented must be culturally relevant, and it is necessary to incorporate traditional ecological knowledge into local management practices. And also it is very relevant to open space for dialogue in the plan implementation process, and therefore it's important to make local governance stronger in the basin. And finally, to achieve the plan goals, we still need to show people the benefits associated to water quality improvements in this basin. So thanks, Brian, and thanks for your time and attention, and the team for organizing this panel.
Brilliant, Amarindya. Thank you very much for that introductory case study and a good example of just how complex lake restoration can be. I'll move on now. Thank you. So Tim can't be with us. Ken, you're standing in for that. So please take the floor and present to us on Lake Erie.
Okay, everybody, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, I'm now transposing myself to a lake I've never been to, but of course, which we all know, probably we all know, because it's a very famous lake of restoration and one of those lakes which was celebrated for its success in restoration. So I'm presenting this small presentation on behalf of Timothy Davis from Bowling Green State University, who has extensive experience on the Laurentian Great Lakes and on Lake Erie in particular. The Great Lakes, as we know, is an immense, largest area of individual lakes collectively together in the world, and it has a very interesting geography as well, political geography as well as physical geography, because it is bordered by several states of the US and the state of Ontario in Canada. And because of the state structure, that inevitably means there is a necessity for a collaborative approach to the management of those lakes. But all was not well, and as you will see at the end of this presentation, is not well with the water quality. There has been a number of outbreaks over the years of harmful cyanobacteria algal blooms throughout the Great Lakes, and you see from this slide, particularly if you look at the map of Lake Erie, you will see the larger bubbles of cyanobacteria, which obviously, as a lakes manager, is not what is wanted. But the recognition of this as a problem goes back several decades, when algal bloom started in the 1960s and 70s, and was part of a wider problem really within the US of water quality degradation. And we'll all be familiar perhaps that during the 50s to 70s, Lake Erie got the nickname as the Dead Lake because of these algal blooms. This was a consequence of industrialization of the region, and particularly some of the large urban and industrialized cities on the shores of the lake, such as Cleveland. And at a time where environmental protection was really quite minimal in the US. And by the mid-1960s, Erie was experiencing many negative impacts, particularly these harmful algal blooms and low dissolved oxygen. Hence, it came to be known as a dead lake. And then, of course, dramatically, in 1969, an oil slick in the Cuyahoga River caught fire in Cleveland, drawing national attention, in fact, international attention to, in fact, the problems of water quality. And in fact, this is a quote from the time. I'll just bring your attention to the bottom part of the red panel here. The lower Cuyahoga River, forgive my pronunciation, has no visible signs of life, not even low forms such as leeches and sludge worms that usually thrive on wastes. It is also, and this I find an extraordinary statement, it is also literally a fire hazard. So that was how degraded the freshwater environment was at the time. But in 1978, there was a water quality agreement in the Great Lakes Basin of limiting the amount of phosphorus. Phosphorus was identified as the key variable and the key problem. And so Lake Erie's phosphorus load was agreed by joint proclamation to be limited to 11,000 tons a year, which translates to about a concentration of 50 micrograms of phosphorus per liter. And that was based on, at the time, a variety of models which helped decision support tools to help that decision of 11,000 tons. And as we see from this graph, then through the 1960s, late 60s and 70s, that in fact, if you just focus on the direct point sources, the blue area, the light blue at the bottom, you can see how there was a dramatic reduction of point source pollution, which resulted in a reduction of total load. So the contribution from other sources didn't change that much, up and down a bit, but the point load sources were effectively managed. And what that meant was that those harmful algal blooms of the 1970s reduced, and through the 80s and 90s, there was actually quite a low amount of problems with algal bloom. So job done, lakes improved. Everybody was happy. It reached international press that Lake Erie could be restored. Lake Erie was restored, and we can now relax and move on. Unfortunately, that was a bit like taking the eye off the ball, because as time went by beyond that, and this is an estimate of mid-summer, of summer loads and summer concentrations of total biologically available phosphorus load, then you could see that here we have data from 1919, 1920, and 21, where in fact the loads are increasing throughout the summer. And the maximum concentrations that had been recorded was about 2015 and to about 2015, 2016. So in fact, what had thought to be a solved problem wasn't solved at all. And in fact, other sources of phosphorus were contributing to this. And the largest blooms of all were recorded in, say, 2011, 2015. And the question then is why, what happened? How could such a success become, have then led to what could be considered to be, in fact, not a success at all? And if we look at a very simple representation of the adaptive management cycle, where we have monitoring, supported by modeling, leads to recommendations, implementation of management, and then that cycle goes on. What appears to have happened was that this part of the cycle, the recommendations and the implementation, was not ignored, but at least there was a reduction in attention to that. And at the same time, we have a shifting climate, which is accentuating some of those effects. Because of time, I won't go through all the details there, but a take-home message is that as temperature increases, there is changes of stratification in the lake. There are changes of rainfall events. There is unknown consequences of storms, and how that mobilizes the nutrients is still work in progress, and something we really need to get a handle on as we go forward in terms of predicting the effect of climate change on nutrient enrichment. And so the moral of the tale, really, at the end of the day, is be attentive to changing circumstances. So I'll finish there, and thanks very much. So back to you, Brian.
Thank you, Ken. Excellent job. Well done. Thank you. Now I hand over to Winnie to present her case study on Lake Victoria. Hi, Winnie.
Hello.
Hi,
I hope
Winnie.
you can see my screen.
We can see your screen. We can hear you nice and clearly.
Okay, thank you. Let me just put it in presentation mode. Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Winnie Nkalubo. I'm the director of the National Fisheries Resources Research Institute in Jinja, Uganda. And I'm going to talk about tackling water quality in a transboundary context and give a case of Lake Victoria. Sorry. I just realized I have interference with this thing at the top.
It's clear for
Okay,
us. It
so,
doesn't interfere.
Yeah, I can't seem to get rid of that thing at the top. So a few key facts about Lake Victoria. It's the world's largest freshwater lake, and it's shared by the Republic of Kenya, United Republic of Tanzania, and the Republic of Uganda, as is shown with this. However, the basin, that is the green boundary around the lake, is shared by 5 countries, to also include the republics of Rwanda and Burundi. And this is a resource that is actually crucial for about 20 to 30 million residents. So in terms of why this transboundary resource matters is really the ecosystem services that it provides in terms of the water for consumptive and non-consumptive purposes, but also the food. We have fish, supporting services such as biodiversity and habitat provision, regulating services, and culture services. However, there are key concerns that the lake is actually dying and that the lake is heavily polluted. And this is just to show we've had this takes center stage in some of our local dailies. And really this has been attributed to quite a couple of stressors, key of them being the fact that we have a high human population growth rate. And what this slide shows along the shoreline, we already have 7 large cities along the shorelines, but in addition to these cities, we also have other cities in the basin. And that in itself makes it one of the most densely populated areas in the world. And some of these places actually have densities exceeding 500 persons per kilometer squared. And so what comes with this is urbanization, obviously, but then an increase in demand for land and land for settlement. And the catchment in itself is dominated by grassland and cropland, with major built-up areas, as it's shown in this slide. But to bring it closer to home, we see that most of the demand for land and the changes that come with that demand in the uses of land tends to cause potential conflict use of water. And we have had flower farms come up, they're using fertilizers. We have seen the wetlands around the lake being converted for agriculture use. Sometimes our cattle are actually grazing in the lake itself. Wetland degradation, we have the case of water hyacinth, the demand for fuel for wood and charcoal, so deforestation, and then land fragmentation, and that comes with siltation. Obviously, some of these problems are actually exacerbated by the fact that we have weak governance, policy, institutional frameworks, but also we also lack a regular monitoring plan. In addition to this, we have new emerging stressor, and this mainly is around the cage culture. In an effort to try and meet the deficit for fish, we have an expanding cage culture where cages are now put in the lake. And if we just look at the Kenyan part of the lake, basically everywhere there are cages. So, and what comes with this cage establishment is a non-adherence to what would be the best management practices. But also, we also lack the zoning to guide how many cages can actually be in which part of the lake. And the concern here is that if it's not appropriately guided or managed, it actually will be unsustainable. So all in all, the urbanization, the industrialization, and the discharge that comes with increase in nutrient loading, actually over time we have seen the algal blooms, especially around the major cities, but also poor discharge or poor handling of our solid waste. So we have increasingly more and more plastic pollution and microplastics. And then obviously an increased incident in fish kills as happened earlier this year. And so one would say, what are we trying to do in terms of now water quality restoration as a lake basin, as a transboundary resource? And the scales of addressing these challenges vary from local, but since it's transboundary, the focus here is that we have a Lake Victoria Basin Integrated Water Resources Management Program. It's a regional program that is coordinated by Lake Victoria Basin Commission, and it aims to improve the water quality and availability through strategic and sustainable management of the Lake Victoria Basin. But it also looks into strengthening the capacity for cross-boundary integrated water resources management, but also improving water quality by reducing the effluent. Secondly, we have come up with transboundary wetland management plans, and these are intended to promote cooperation in the development and management of this shared environment and water and the natural resources between countries. We have also encouraged what would be investment in resource efficiency and cleaner production technologies, or the greening of the value chain. And this has been done for the tea industry in Kenya, where there is efficient and maximum use of the natural resources while trying to reduce what would be the impacts across the tea value chain. And it begins right with encouraging planting of shade trees to sort of avert issues of soil conservation and afforestation, but also using, encouraging the use of organic fertilizers. The industries, of course, with an increasing human population, we'll definitely need increasing infrastructure for wastewater treatment. And the concept of industrial symbiosis is something that is increasingly promoted in the region to try and get at least 2 or more industries where the waste of one can actually be a raw material of another one. For the cages and the expanding cage culture, there are guidelines for establishment and operationalizing of these cages on Lake Victoria. They have been developed, and these guide right from establishing the cage farming, but also aspects of the policy and legal institutional requirements are provided in these guidelines. And then the issue of modeling, I think the previous speaker talked about understanding well the climate change and climate variabilities in our systems. We definitely are looking into how we can have these simulation models that can address or help us to predict future scenarios and inform the management strategies. And for this, we definitely need more capacity building and training for this. But also stakeholder participation, trying to get the public on board, different stakeholders, by sensitizing them to actually reduce some of these point and non-point source loading. And then the issue of data exchange and even coming up with data, but also sharing databases. And the need for regional policy is increasingly talked about. Since it's a transboundary resource, there has to be some policy to guide actually data and information sharing across the partner states. And then lastly, the issue of governance. We need good governance, and for this, we are advocating more and more for our riparian countries to come and take action, take necessary steps that will ensure that we reverse some of this environmental degradation that we have witnessed in various parts of the lake. I want to thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Winnie. Thank you. Mike, have you got any feedback from the chat so far for our case study speakers?
Hello. Yeah, fantastic. Well, first of all, thanks to the speakers. Great presentation about 3 iconic lakes. There's a question for Amarindia that came in the chat, and I've also pasted it for her in the Zoom chat so she can read it. Is nutrient pollution a widespread issue in Chile, and is there a national scale plan or policy for nutrient emission reduction?
Thanks, Mike. Yes, there is a national policy to reduce emissions from industrial pollutants and also nutrients. We are developing now some ambient water quality standards for the protection of the environment. And we are updating also the emission standard limits for point sources of pollution. But also we need to, we have a lot of work to do in this way. There is a lot of problems like in specific lakes, mainly in coastal areas, because of the context of climate change, reduction in flows, for example, and of course the mixing influence between point sources and land use changes. So yeah, there is a policy in Chile. We are working on that.
Thank you very much, Amarindia. And you also brought forward this issue of climate change. We've already heard this in all of the presentations, actually. One of the usual suspects also had a question for Ken, who answered that already nicely in the chat. It was about this increased summer pea load in Lake Erie. So who is interested in the answer, you can read it over there. We had
Mike, I might just add.
Perfect. Yeah.
I might just add that, you know, the fable of Alice in Wonderland, for those who have read it, I'm sure you should all have read it in your life at some point. A wonderful book. If for those who read Alice in Wonderland, there was a wonderful phrase about running faster to keep still. And I think lake eutrophication and nutrient enrichment and Lake Erie is probably a very good example of that saying, because although initial management actions have some success, it doesn't eradicate some of the lurking problems, such as perhaps the sediment buildup, which of course is very common in many lakes across the world. So I bring a bit of culture to the proceedings with Alice in Wonderland.
Yeah, thanks, Ken. It indeed, it's really a wicked problem. As was also brought forward by Winnie about Lake Victoria, highly complex system. And there was one thing before this is this increase in cage aquaculture. So what actually is being cultured there, and is there a risk of escape of these fish? Are they native or are they not native?
Yeah, thank you very much. So right now, the most commonly farmed species is Nile tilapia, and it is, well, it's not originally from Lake Victoria, but it's been there since the 50s, and that is what is most commonly farmed in these cages. Of course, the concern, the concern would be diseases that come with having this intensification in a particular place, and what that means if they escaped into, say, the natural system, but also then what would be the localized pollution that would happen if people are not minding what, like the feeding regimes, and some people are overfeeding. What are they feeding on, and what happens when you have a lot of this feed eventually becoming toxic and creating anoxia in various pockets of the lake. So that would be the concern. And then we're saying that, okay, right now we need to have some sort of guidance on how many cages can you have in the part of the lake. Like you saw the map with basically Kenya, it has the smallest part of the lake, but it has probably the most cages. And then there has to be some guidance. And then the concern would be also that, like for Uganda, we are on the downstream end. And so if we don't have controls upstream, then definitely all the pollution that comes from upstream will end up downstream. And then it will be really disastrous for us.
That's a sobering point, I think, Mike. I'm going to end the discussion. Thank you very much, everybody, for that. Sandra, if you could give us as brief as you can, because I've let this run on a bit. If you could give us an introduction to the global survey, that would be really useful. Thank you.
Yes. So I am Sandra Poikane, Joint Research Center, European Commission. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Oh, great.
It's not in presentation mode. Yeah, we can see it. That's it.
I will very briefly introduce our global survey of lake restoration, which we developed for this conference, but we really hope to get your opinions because it will be very useful for your and our work. So it's a brief survey. It's available online. Now it is in 5 languages, and it will just ask your 10-15 minutes of your time. We ask your main facts about your lakes, main pressures, main restoration targets, and what is most important, we want to understand what are your main reasons behind your success and behind your failures, and which could be way forward. We want to collate experience across the world's lake restoration community, and in order to inform our future activities. And some examples could be workshops, conferences, courses, or exchange of information or best practice guides. So please fill in this survey and become co-author of Lake Restoration White Paper. And I will show this survey you can find on the web page of this session. You can look to tab files, and then under this tab, you can find global survey for lake restoration, both in PDF file, just to have a quick overview, and also in a questionnaire form. And just very few, just 2 highlights, which we got already from the 30 answers, which we already got. One question is, what are the key pressures? What are the key problems affecting your lakes? And we know that eutrophication usually is the main problem, number 1. But here, quite interesting, the current results, preliminary results, show that climate change is number 1 pressure affecting the lakes, the world lakes. And the second is hydrological alterations. Nutrients is only number 3, and invasive taxa number 4, which is quite interesting because, as also we know that hydrological alterations and invasive taxa, these pressures are very enhanced or even sometimes caused by climate change. And this second question is, what are the reasons for failure of restoration? And here probably, as we can expect, that number one is insufficient funding. But number two, which comes together with this first question, is poor understanding of pressures and their effects, which can be quite understandable because both climate change, hydrological alterations, and invasive taxa are relatively new and less understood pressures. And here we can work together with different activities to enhance our understanding. So again, just this, you can find the survey on the webpage of this session, and we are looking forward to get your input. And when your name will be, the output of this survey will be like restoration white paper, which will include these results, and also your name, if you wish, would be on this paper, and you will be included also in emailing and discussion of this paper and future activities. So this is good opportunity to be included in Lake Restoration Worldwide Forum. Thanks a lot. Hope to see you again in next workshops.
Thank you, Sandra. Wonderful job at calling back some time for me. Thank you. Lawrence, I won't take up any more of your time. If you want to get started on the panel discussion to try and pull all of this together, that would be extremely, extremely welcome. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Brian. Yeah, I just want to, I'm going to go straight in, and so the panel discussion is really going to focus on solutions, really. We've heard a bit about the challenges from Sandra there. And I'm going to go straight in and start with questions to Bethany and Maria Franco. But Bethany, who is a policy specialist at the Society for Ecological Restoration. Can I start with you, Bethany, on something that comes from the survey, a question in the survey, on what you see as the most critical factor for delivering successful ecosystem restoration?
Thanks so much, Lawrence, and thanks to everybody for the presentations. I will try to keep it brief, but I wanted to kind of respond to that based on what we heard from the speed dating. And I think what the Society for Ecological Restoration would say, and I think especially in conjunction with our work with the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration, is that we've introduced, and on September 7th, in partnership with FAO and UNEP, we'll be introducing a set of 10 principles for the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. And those draw very heavily from the Society for Ecological Restoration's 8 principles for ecological restoration. And I won't go through all 10 of them, but I think there are a few key things that came up in each of the presentations that really illustrate some of the different principles. So I'll use that to maybe answer the question. And I think one is that we need to approach restoration from both the ecological and social perspective. And so you really heard that in Amarindia's presentation and in Winnie's presentation, and in Ken's, in all three, or Tim's. You know, we can't do ecological restoration in a vacuum, or ecosystem restoration or lake restoration in a vacuum. We have to engage the communities, and we have to look at how restoration actually provides all of these different services. And so if you look at the different principles, you know, one of the first principle SER has is that ecosystem or ecological restoration engages stakeholders. And the second one is that it draws on many types of knowledge. So again, coming back to Amarindia's presentation and the importance of the indigenous communities and local education, and also of understanding what is the knowledge that our local communities hold and how can that be used to apply to restoration. Another key point that I think Sandra just made incredibly well is that we need to learn from and understand from failure. If we don't do that knowledge sharing, again, celebrating all types of knowledge, including the knowledge that we learn when we fail, we will never move forward. A huge number of restoration projects fail, and they fail for a lot of different reasons. Most often, they fail because the environment is uncertain and unstable. With or without climate change, the environment doesn't always respond the way we expect it to respond when we implement restoration. So the more knowledge we have, the better we can do. I think there are, I could give 7 other examples or 9 other examples, but I think I have to stop now, and I can come back to it if there's time. But I could have brought in all 10 principles, and we will be sharing them on September 7th. So the UN Decade principles will be available then.
Well, if you could put into the Pathful chat, maybe a link to those, that would be fantastic.
as soon as they're ready, but they're not.
Okay, great. Okay.
I will put in the Pathable chat what the 10 principles are. They just have not been publicly. I don't know if I'm allowed to do that, actually. I don't think I can. So
Okay.
I don't think I can do that. Sorry.
Maybe you could put in the US ones that have been. But okay, I'll move swiftly on to Maria Franco-Chueri, who's at the World Resources Institute, and particularly looking at initiatives for restoring degraded ecosystems in Latin America and the Caribbean. And one aspect I know that Bethany didn't touch upon there was finance, Maria, and I just wondered whether you have anything to comment on that or any other aspects of where you see success helps drive success.
Sure, Lawrence, thank you very much for the question, and thank you everyone for their presentation and participation today. Actually, I was going to mention some elements that Bethany mentioned already, but back in 2013, when a few years after the Bond Challenge launch, WRI and IUCN assessed more than 20 examples around the globe of forest and landscape restoration, including successes and failures. And they were trying to answer the question, how can restoration be done successfully? And they found these 3 common elements to successful restoration. The first one was a clear motivation that I think we all have here, and most of the countries and where we work, they do have that. The second one was enabling conditions in place, such as ecological, market, policy, social, and institutional conditions that Bethany talked about a little bit. And the last one was implementation capacity and resources. And this element of resources and finance, of course, is a central piece for successful restoration. So perhaps my first point here would be the need for private resources to complement, of course, not substitute public investments in restoration. And the role of the private sector is crucial here for long-term results and also for reaching scale. And that's one of the key elements of the work we're doing through Initiative 20 by 20, that is the Latin American restoration initiative that is supporting the Bond Challenge and the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. We are trying to show that there's an economic case for landscape restoration, given that it has the potential to contribute to improved agricultural yields in the degraded lands, contain biodiversity losses, contribute to increases in carbon stocks, and of course, secure gains in soil and water quality. And we are working with a coalition of financial partners, most of them impact investors who have announced their intention to invest in more than $2.5 billion in restoration in the region. And although they're already investing and they're looking to expand their portfolios, they oftentimes run into significant barriers, such as an absence of a robust portfolio of investment opportunities, high risk perception, and high transaction costs. So these are all aspects that need to be addressed in order to attract more investments into restoration. And perhaps I will finalize with 3 quick thoughts. One is that what we are seeing is that there's still a lack of financial opportunities for small and medium-sized restoration opportunities and businesses. Normally, if they have small ticket sizes, it's hard to attract the attention of several impact investors. So it's important to develop mechanisms and attract stakeholders to the ecosystem, this investment ecosystem, in order to address this. The second one is that investors, sometimes they also face restrictions to invest in pre-investment phases, such as pre-feasibility studies. So there should be ways to address this gap. And we're thinking about, for example, investment readiness facilities that can help make these projects bankable. This is from the private finance point of view. And the last one is incentives. And this is key, and this is a way in which the public and private sector can articulate better. So countries, governments should strengthen or develop incentive schemes for restoration, because these play an important role in reducing the average initial cost of restoration, in promoting public-private partnerships that are key as well for restoration, and also creating conditions so that local banks can grant loans for these practices. So these are all elements that I think are key for bringing more investment into restoration, and bringing the private sector attention, which as I mentioned, complements public finance, which are not enough for the goals these countries have.
I mean, Maria, I think that sounds like a really fantastic and fascinating project. So again, like Bethany, I would really recommend if you put a link to the 20 by 20 initiative in the particle chat, so people can follow up on that. That'd be great. I think this whole area of public-private finance is something that we, to have good examples of that is really excellent. So yeah, no, thanks. I would like to now sort of move on to Dimple Roy, who's a policy specialist at the International Institute for Sustainable Development, based in Canada. And Dimple, we've heard about a couple of great case studies. One in our speed dating, the one from Chile is a really good example where policy or the ministry are really leading and pushing policy to drive forward this sort of landscape restoration. I just wondered if you had any other examples from around the world or North America where you've really identified strong water policy helping drive lake restoration programs.
Thanks very much, Lawrence. Wonderful to be here with all of these other speakers. So I'm going to, there is no one policy in my mind. Lake restoration, as has been talked about before, is complicated. We're talking about a combination of point sources, non-point sources, and then everything in between, even when it comes to specific pollutants. But I will highlight the work that is going on. So IISD is a global think tank, but much of our freshwater work is happening right here in Canada. And I'm sitting in the Lake Winnipeg Basin, 10th largest freshwater lake in the world, complicated, transboundary, lots of non-point source pollutants, combination of phosphorus, nutrients, but also emerging contaminants. And something that we've been highlighting quite a bit is the role of natural infrastructure. And I use that term quite specifically as a subset of nature-based solutions, naturalized systems that are managed for infrastructure outcomes. And by making that connection very, very intentionally, I guess, we are attempting to say that communities that have to meet our infrastructure needs, so rural municipalities, cities who have to kind of manage stormwater, provide drinking water treatment, provide wastewater treatment, provide reduction from the risks of flood and drought, climate impacts. If we look at those outcomes much, much more specifically, and then go back to the ecosystems that can provide us those outcomes, that's where we'll get the scaling of some of these ecosystem restoration efforts. So we're really making that effort to connect, to kind of push on the policies that focus on natural infrastructure. And in that space, the federal government in Canada now, only for the last couple of years, has started recognizing natural infrastructure in their infrastructure kind of funding programs. We have regional policies here, in Manitoba, where Lake Winnipeg lies, that focus on providing support and funding for smaller scale wetland restoration projects. And just building on some of the points that my colleagues made, scale was a big issue. So policies were typically infrastructure programs are focused on, multi-million dollar projects. So one of the key challenges to translate that policy for natural infrastructure was to make sure that the threshold was dropped from what used to be a minimum of $20 million to something smaller that could accommodate wetland restoration, water retention projects. And then I'll just highlight that one of the other things that we're really focusing on, and some of our policymakers are very interested, is in ensuring that these policies come with adequate metrics. So just like we talk about ecosystem restoration metrics, one of the best practices that we're advocating for, and the Conservation Trust, which is this $204 million trust fund that's funding a lot of the smaller ecosystem restoration projects here in the Lake Winnipeg Basin, is really interested in making the connections between those ecosystem restoration metrics, so acres of wetland restored, miles of riparian buffers, translating them into outcomes that we really care about. So, how do we ensure that our public has cleaner water? what does that actually mean? So translating that landscape management and ecosystem restoration actions into higher level understandable metrics, which is really key for policymakers, is something that policies here are turning to and that we're really advocating for.
I mean, that's great, Dimple. I'm going to move on quickly now to Madalitso, who Madalitso Chatsika is a lecturer in fisheries management at Lilongwe University in Malawi, and clearly ecological outcomes and healthy lake ecosystems is one of your areas, Madalitso. So I just wondered if you could talk about maybe any good examples of collaboration with the fisheries sector and the ways they can help with lake restoration, or how you engage that sector to sort of explain the benefits of lake restoration.
Okay, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to speak about Malawi, and also thanking the other presenters who have talked about things that are also relevant to Malawi, like the example of Lake Erie and eutrophication. Indeed, in Malawi, there is some good collaboration with the sector, and the Fisheries Department is the leader in this approach, where we have taken it as an ecosystem approach to fisheries management, where we are involving forestry, agriculture, Department of Water, and also other local authorities in the management of water and fisheries resources in Malawi. And in this case, one of the activities that we are doing is to make sure that we train the sector on issues of ecosystems approach, and also making sure that we harmonize the different policies, because sometimes you find that the policies from Department of Fisheries and other sectors, like, for example, the agriculture or the forestry, are not speaking to each other. So with this ecosystems approach, which is more or less like co-management or participatory fisheries management, we are able to bring in different stakeholders that are working on the upland to make sure that whatever they are doing in the terrestrial area does not negatively affect the fisheries or the water resources. Because by the end of the day, if they are applying fertilizers, if they are using chemicals to treat pesticides, if they are cutting trees, it all trickles down to the fisheries resources and water quality. So really the Department of Fisheries has taken a role, and with funding from FAO, we are training people from different sectors on ecosystems approach to fisheries management to make sure that the water resources and also the fisheries resources are managed properly. Of course, there are a little bit some hiccups, because the stakeholder involvement is really not straightforward. But the Department of Fisheries is really taking a lead to make sure that all sectors, whether private or public, are involved in this issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Madalitso. It's really great to hear that cross-sector approach. I think I need to hand over very quickly to Brian and Ken now.
Yes,
thank you to the panelists.
Thanks, Lawrence. Over to you, Ken, just for the final words. Thank you, everybody, for all your contributions today. Wonderful, really insightful, and Ken has the challenge now to wrap it all up for us. Thanks, Ken, and goodbye, everybody.
Okay, again, can you see my slide?
Yes, we can.
Summary and close. Well, thanks very much, everybody, for that great discussion. I have about a couple of minutes to summarize and close. I'm going to put this summary also in the chat when I finish, just so that you are aware of it. And then do also check out our session earlier in the week on Tuesday, where we had some slightly different summaries. So I think one of the key points that comes across, without going through all of these points I picked up on, is this idea of collaboration and partnerships, multi-sectoral, trying to think, we know it, but it's about connecting the dots and connecting the sectors. And I think that's what really the World Water Quality Alliance is really trying to do, build on the science, but also bring in the multiple stakeholders. We've heard it a million times, but we don't have any choice anymore. It is no longer a nuanced debate. It is an essential requirement. So in order to help us reach that goal of essential requirement for the immediate and longer term future, please do, if you have experience in lake restoration or you are connected with others who have experience, please do fill out this survey, because this survey becomes a really important contribution to the white paper that we want to produce. Please also get involved. This is not a select few who have a little club called the World Water Quality Alliance. Because it's an alliance, it is open to anybody who has an interest in something to contribute. So if you feel you have an interest in something to contribute, then please send an email to wwqa.coordination@un.org, and we will then respond to you and do connect also with each other. Later in the year, we want to have a webinar to discuss progress and get more involved in the production of this white paper on lake restoration. And that has been mentioned a couple of times. That is a short-term goal, which will also feed into a larger political agenda at the UNEA conference next year, in order to try to really put lake restoration on the map and freshwater systems much more on the map. And in that point, it's entirely possible that, to use a cliche at the moment, we can bend the curve if we can mobilize enough energy from the community. And I would just point out, I'm delighted to have the Society of Ecological Restoration at this meeting, and there is a very important paper in the file, so do download that. It's open access, and it is very informative. And with that, I'd like to thank everybody for being involved with this session, and wish you all a very good rest of the day and a nice end to Stockholm Water Week, which finishes tomorrow. So on that note, I thank everybody and say cheerio.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you, everybody. Goodbye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thank
Bye.
you
Thank you.
very much.
Bye-bye.